So thank you very much for coming, and with no further ado, I think it would be time for me to introduce today's speaker. And we have two lovely people here with us. Number one, we have Michele Goetz, which is from Forrester. Michele, maybe you want to say a couple of words about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, Fami. Thank you for having me. So as I said, I'm an analyst here at Forrester. I focus on everything from data to AI, but really where I concentrate on is how do you get value from data? Where does that come from? Why should you care about it? So covering everything from, data to data governance and data mesh, which is really all about that. And to be honest, why do I care? Why do I love data so much? Why do I focus on that? Because I've probably been in your shoes in some manner, shape, or form in the past 25 years. I've run data governance programs. I have led data and analytic groups. I've been a data scientist. I've worked as a consultant for technology firms, and I've led marketing for data quality and governance solutions. So I just feel at home. It's great. And I'm really excited to be able to join the conversation today.
Thank you so much, Michele. That was a wonderful introduction. And so with no further ado, Dr. Nick Golovin, the founder of Data Virtuality, maybe you can say a couple of words towards what you do.
Sure. It's a pleasure. I'm Nick Golovin. I am a founder of Data Virtuality. It's a great pleasure to be here today. A couple of words about myself. I would call myself a technical guy, a database guy. So my professional career was pretty much concentrated on things like data integration, data warehousing, databases in general. But within this narrow channel, I was looking at things from different perspectives. So I was working in the industry, multinational integration projects, but I also researching at the university, but all staying within the same topic: data integration, data warehousing, and all things data.
Okay, thank you very much, Nick. So last but not least, my name is Tammy Coles, and I'm a data mesh enthusiast. And I'm very, very curious what Michele and Nick have in store for us today for the questions I've got prepared for you. As you potentially noticed, I'll be the moderator for today's conversation and event. And before we really kind of go into the questions, I think it was very important to understand what data mesh actually is. So we're going to quickly talk about what data mesh is and what framework it kind of goes into. So the data mesh framework is formulated by Zhamak Dehghani, and it was driven by the market. It's come from the business side versus many other frameworks which have come throughout the times. And basically, it really uses these 4 columns, which you can see on your screen right now, and it focuses mainly on the domain-driven data centralization, which means that instead of the data being put into a centralized depository like a data lake, it actually stays with the domains, and domains could be things like marketing, it could be human resource, financial, because that's where the experts are. And this really leans itself very closely to the second point, which is data as a product. In the past, we've really thought of data as an asset. We collected it, we've had it, we didn't share it. And her idea is really to use it in such a form that it is shareable, usable by the business, that it's shareable with all the other people, and for that it needs to be able to be worked on at the domain itself. Having said that, obviously governance is very, very important, and you still need, if you like, a central governance, which is like a federated computational governance. It's very, very important to make sure that you abide by the rules which are in different countries. So somehow, even though you have this decentralized situation, you need to have a governance which is centralized. And last but not least, because you want to enable the business, you need to have some kind of structure which allows them to self-service. So there has a self-service infrastructure. So when we speak about data mesh, these are kind of the points we're talking about, and you can find out more about these things looking in the internet, but that's just for the definition of data mesh. And then really to kind of look at data mesh and how did we get here? Where did data mesh come from? Well, we'll kind of put this together. This is just one way of seeing it. There'll be, I'm sure, lots of different conversations as how you can see it. But to make it simple, we're thinking that really the way we dealt with data, or how we started with it, is really on the ETL side. So we collected a lot of data, focused on that, and really didn't do very much more with that. And then we realized we started a little bit working with it, and we realized we needed the data a little bit faster than just copying it. Data was growing very quickly, and we added the data virtualization component to that, and creating, if you want, a logical data warehouse where you could capture data a bit faster. Going from that point, we started realizing that within the industry and within our different departments, data was becoming more important. So initially it was maybe just the business analysts and the analytics department which needed data, but we found that more and more departments were using different products, were using different ways, also wanting to derive information from that data. So we started having more use cases which needed a new framework, which is, if you want, the data fabric. And the data fabric really uses a logical data warehouse plus transactional systems, so even operational integration, and then automation and metadata automation to make it faster and easier to be able to understand the data and become tech-centric or going business-centric, if you want, and driving the data inwards, making sure everybody's using it and starting to derive value out of it slowly, which really very smoothly brings us over to the data mesh. And the data mesh is with a lot more automation on the 4 columns I've just talked about. And it's focusing on the data outcome. It's focusing on that everybody can access that data. It's focusing on sharing the data, maybe even with different stakes outside of the company. It's becoming a data-driven company or data-driven initiative. And for that, everybody needs to be able to use that data, and everybody needs to be able to understand that data. And that's really the evolution to data mesh. But this is just a very, 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 very kind of superficial overview. And I think a person who can explain this much better than me and what the difference is between data fabric and data mesh is Michele. So what is the difference between data mesh and data fabric, Michele? Can you have data mesh and data fabric in the same company?
You always have data mesh and data fabric within the same company. That's kind of the answer. Or you always have data fabric, and the evolution is are you applying the data mesh approach to get your data fabric to do what it needs to do? I mean, it really all comes down to that data mesh simply is what's in it for me, and is my data working for me? And that's always within the context of the business stakeholder. What decisions do they have to make? What engagements with customers do they have? What value are they presenting to the market? And are they achieving the outcomes that they want? And without that context of the business and how you can represent that and describe that and tell that story with data, all the data fabric investments that you make are never really going to come to fruition. So, you know, every business should have both. But most organizations are starting from the data fabric and finding that way of, rather than coming bottom up, as you talked about, how do we come top down from our outcomes?
That's really interesting, because I suppose the image shows that there's 2 ways, but actually they both point into the same direction. Nick, is there anything you would like to add to that? I think no.
I would join Michele in saying that we see a similar thing, whereas like in the public mind there seems to be a contradiction, kind of competition between data fabric and data mesh. But indeed, there are some companies who are actually kind of pursuing both approaches. One is more on the philosophical and organizational manner, and the other more on the technical side, and how do you build things and with which components.
Okay, that's really, really interesting. So if we come to that situation, what do you think once somebody gets approached with data mesh, what do you think are the biggest challenges or obstacles for organizations which are looking at wanting to implement or having to implement the data mesh concept, because they're coming towards something where they say, the concept we have at the moment isn't sufficient? How does that work, Michele?
There has been a trend overall to really drive self-service in analytics. And you can't drive self-service and analytics without having the appropriate context for the data, the awareness and understanding of where that data exists, where it's coming from, what the context of it is, to begin with. It's just really hard to work with the data when you just don't understand it. And so, you can see some of the challenges already that we're seeing. Like, one, how do you keep the data and the speed of business and customers in sync? People think of this as like sort of the big data thing, volume, velocity, variety, veracity. And those are certainly elements of it, but really what it comes down to is I just need to understand my data. And it's really, really hard because everything's moving so quickly, not just my data, but my business. My data is moving quickly because of my business. But then you see the other self-service things in here, like, how do you deal with all of this information? How do you reconcile it? How do you make sense of it, in a particular point in time and at a decision? And then, are you providing the foundational capabilities to allow and enable that self-service, whether you're a business decision maker or whether you're an analyst? And so, do you have the right capabilities there? Did you invest in your data appropriately? Is there the right accessibility? And is the maturity of the technologies that you're using actually satisfying the way that you think your data experience should be? And so really what I think is kind of, encouraging in the data mesh conversation and the approach is really the fact that because self-service is such a core principle, it makes you come back to the what's in it for me, how do I make the data work, and is it going to give me the outcomes that are expected? And you do that because you can govern your data, you can describe it as a product or the outcome as a product, and you can put the right context around it because you are being domain centric. So just from one angle where we are today or where our trend is, you can see how those other three components of data mesh really harmonize together. But really you can come from any angle. I mean, the context of putting the data in context of your business and the speed of decisions, like, that's domain centricity. What's your value stream? What's your business process? So everything is represented here. It's really kind of interesting.
That sounds really, really interesting in that way, that basically it sounds like data goes into the center stage. It's right in the middle of all of this. And maybe beforehand, IT was in the center stage, and even beforehand, collecting the data was center stage. So this change of focus has been there. So having said that, what do you think are the 5 key factors that companies need to consider when they're thinking of implementing a data mesh concept?
Mm-hmm. The first thing is pick an objective and an outcome that you can attain. Understand, just get really pragmatic. Data mesh can feel really overwhelming. Oh, I have a domain. My domain is a customer. And then they're just sort of ratcheting around that same MDM sort of concept that we've had for quite some time. Well, no, it's the customer from a particular point of view and a particular type of business outcome that you want. And that gives you a much better understanding about what information about the customer is really important, how that information is going to be used, and what are the analytic and automation and operational mechanisms and capabilities that are going to enable digitally the use of a data product for that. So really just bite-sized pizzas. Take a bite, don't eat the whole sandwich at once, even though we want to because we're hungry. And, so that's number one. I think number two is consider the literacy of your business stakeholders, because while they intuitively understand that data is really important and that they should use the data and be data driven and insight driven, most of the time, that's a lot of buzzwords, but there's no what's in it for me. There's no real understanding. So helping your business stakeholders really understand what is data, put it in context of how they use it, how they describe it, bring it front and center in their own experiences, whether they're in a BI and analytic view, whether they're in their CRM systems or ERP systems, or whether they're creating digital capabilities. The views of those applications and the views of that analytics is really where the literacy begins of tying data to how you execute. The other things are really, kind of natural to the data mesh concept, which is everybody's got a role and responsibility. And in that vein of self-service, it's allowing the organization to democratize, not just creating a culture of no and restriction from data governance. So how you enable that self-service and democratization at the same time that you're also thinking about policies and embedding those policies in ways that you can run self-service. So those are kind of two, but they're dichotomies of each other. And then lastly, collaboration is huge. No one sits in a cubicle and works with data anymore and only runs it through a spreadsheet or is pulling information from databases or driving a pipeline in an ETL job. Domain centricity and data as a product is grounded in the fact that there is a business outcome that comes from that. And you need all subject matter expertise to bring that data to fruition. And you always have to think about the wider scope of your partners internally and externally. You have to think the wider scope of your practices for cross, and matrixed unity in the way that you're delivering on a data product. And the platforms themselves should also enable this, not just help the individual in an autonomous fashion, but allow them to collaborate, allow them to test, allow them to bring data and those insights forward into the organization. So those are really the 5 things that I would concentrate on.
Okay, perfect. And we just have a slide here as well. We're showing a little bit about the data is collaborative. So when we're talking a little bit about the stakeholders, and I think you've touched upon that a little bit earlier, is there anything else you would like to add to this slide here?
Yeah, I mean, what you can notice, it's the arrows are really kind of saying everything, that there's always a back and forth, of responsibility and shared responsibility. There's a understanding of like, what subject matter expertise am I bringing to the table? What do you bring to the table? It's always a better together kind of scenario. But what I also want to sort of demonstrate are sort of 2 roles here. A lot of times when we get hung up on insights, it's the business stakeholder, because they're making the decisions. They know what's going on within their operations and with their customers. Data analysts they know how to work with the data and get the insights, but then they need a little bit of support from the data engineer. Nobody wants governance. Like, how dare you get in the way of, what I'm trying to do? Don't you slow me down. I don't need bureaucracy. So really the key thing is finding the right way to address that federated computational governance and turning the dial appropriately and not over restricting. And a good data steward understands how to balance risk and enablement and outcome. And then lastly, everything's got to go somewhere. It's nice to look at data on a pretty screen, but the reason why data mesh is so important is because data as a product is embedding and infusing that data and insight into where we work and those decisions and the experiences that we're creating with customers and partners. And so not taking into account the portability of the data and the insight upstream into our business, like leaves us in the same place that we've always been. So having some understanding about the digital experience and where data insight would travel, and ensuring that you know what needs to be translated to your developer teams, so your intelligence is embedded in your applications, and those digital experiences are really important here. So it's not the trinity anymore of stakeholder, analytics, and engineer. Data stewards are your friend too, and you've got somebody to help you get that stuff out there. It's fantastic.
So it's collaborative on the technical side, and it's collaborative over the team side, and it's collaborative. Basically, the idea is really to make everything work together. And for that, you really all need to be aware that you're using the data, kind of going with that. And these are where all the arrows go. So I thought that was a very good explanation. Thank you very, very much. I think now we really come to the first little poll, which we want to share with our audience. And the question for you, for the audience, is when it comes to data mesh, what overwhelms you the most? And we're going to give you a couple of minutes to be able to answer that. So it's really interesting. The main point is keeping the data and the speed of the business. And I think that's similar to basically what you had said in your top 5 data challenges, Michele. So that seems to be the biggest worry. Keeping data and the speed of the business and customers in sync is the point which is most worrying. So Nick, how do you think that data virtualization fits into this picture?
This is a very good question, but before I start answering this, I would maybe spend a couple of words talking about the term data virtualization, because there can be different understandings of what data virtualization is, and for many, indeed, data virtualization has a notion of like a kind of data integration approach where you don't move data, you just connect, don't collect. And that's a valid way of thinking about this. It's very much tied to what was called data federation earlier on. But our understanding of data virtualization is actually different. And maybe we should really come up with a different term for it, something like smart data virtualization or some other marketing name, basically. But the way we see data virtualization is the ability to provide access to data, to different use cases, to different stakeholders on the business side, to be able to provide it in different way, being agnostic of where they are physically located, while still supporting different ways of getting to this data on the technical side. So that means for us, data virtualization is not like, let's not copy the data, but for us, data virtualization is, let's not restrict ourselves by using some way of some integration style in our ability to deliver the data. So the focus for us is really about delivering data, providing access to data, and on the other side, providing more than one way of getting the integration done technically. So be it by getting to the data sources directly and getting the data, or ETLing the data, or EOTing the data around, or doing streaming, doing change data capture. So in our understanding, data virtualization is about hiding all those technical details from the consumer, while providing the consumer with the best and optimal way of getting to the data. And having said this, we of course see us very much squarely fitting into this concept of data mesh, and this actually from 2 perspectives. One perspective is really handling this decentralized aspect, decentralized architecture, because this decentralization is something this philosophy of this decentralized data architecture is something we were living and providing for many years before data mesh came around. So we were actually waiting very much for this high-level concept coming up, but we were already providing more technical architecture vision towards this concept. So one way how data virtualization fits in is really by making it possible to manage this decentralized data architecture. And the other way how I see data virtualization fit in is by putting focus on this idea of having a connection layer, a kind of a layer which connects all this technical complexity, decentralized and so on one side, and on the other side, the business consumers, which can also be complex, and they have a variety of use cases, different requirements, and so on. So this idea of connecting those 2 worlds is the other way I see us fitting into this big picture.
And Michele, is there anything you would like to be adding to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think really what it comes down to is, you don't have to see and work with data all the way at the edge of where that application is. Sometimes that's just too much and you're overbuilding for what you want to be able to do. And, you know, having a nice, you know, middle ground where data virtualization can provide the view of the data that is important to you and let you apply your own expertise, your own experiences, your own, you know, desires of what you're trying to achieve to the data, and then present that where you want it. Like that self-service notion of the consumer of the data is allowed to now make the decision, where can you most effectively handle and deliver on those insights, is really, it's such a great, it's such a great opportunity now, versus having to wait for IT to not only do something with all of the data and then put it into, you know, spend another set of weeks and months in what is that presentation mode going to be, that we've got such a landscape of choices for our consumers. And data virtualization really creates that self-service environment to allow us to be able to work with it easier. And as Nick said, like, I don't have to deal with the complexity of it. I don't have to think about the schemas and the semantics and the metadata and what is the service level agreement and the refreshes. I can just get my data. It's great.
So in short, hide the complexity, make data more usable, and don't make all of us data scientists to be able to use the data, right, is what I summarized in that. And I think you said that much better than I did, but I think that's something which I as well like about the data mesh aspect of it, and that makes me enthusiastic that maybe, even though I'm not very good on the technical side, that eventually I can contribute with the knowledge I have. So that's very exciting. So Nick,
let me shortly add to what Michele and you said by saying that it actually fits very well with the results of this first poll we had, where it was very clear that really the speed of getting the data, speed of getting business involved, the speed of business getting to see the data and also getting to the results is actually crucial and most important. So that's interesting how it all fits together. It seems to be the important piece.
Yeah, that's interesting how our clients have responded there as well. So that now that we've talked a little bit more about data mesh, maybe now is the time as well to ask you, Nick, really directly, are you positioning yourself as an enabler of data mesh? Do you have customers who enable elements of data mesh with the data virtualization solution? How, maybe, is there something you could say to that?
Yes, absolutely. So we do have customers who pursue the philosophy of data mesh, and they are building their data mesh operations and their data mesh architectures based on the technology of data virtuality. It's the right way to ask if we are an enabler, because we're certainly not the data mesh itself. So data mesh as a concept, it really needs multiple pieces to be working, multiple technological pieces, also a lot of things beyond the technology, but even for the technology, it's really more than one piece. And I think it's best to kind of to illustrate how exactly we do this, how exactly we enable this, is by looking at some customer use cases and kind of relating the real use cases to the concept of data mesh. So one of the examples, we also see the slide here on the screen. It's one of our customers, one of the biggest pension funds worldwide, and indeed they are pursuing the data mesh philosophy. They are building this. I have to say, for most of our customers, it's rather we are building it and we are living it. I cannot say of anybody who says like, okay, we are done, we've built it. But that's probably also normal, right? Because it's more philosophy, it's more of way of doing this, and not a destination you arrive to and you are there. So I think that's totally okay. But the way our customers do it. So on this example, so this customer has organization and also technically very differentiated environments, lots of different departments who work on data from different perspectives. Sometimes they're also not allowed to directly see the data of each other. So the situation on the data source side, I would say it's complicated. Many technologies, many types of data, many stakeholders. On one side, many domains, to put it in the data mesh terminology. That's what we see on the left side, but also on the right side, of course, also driven by this landscape. It's also a lot of different use cases, a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of different requirements. So we can really talk about different domains and different data products which need to be built there. And those data products, if we are talking a bit more about this right side, so these data products can really range from simple things like a report or even a data set to download somewhere and work with it in a machine learning tool to build, for example, a risk model, or just some report, but also to things which have to do with, for example, digital transformation, with mobile applications, with smart data products, where you have, for example, a mobile phone, you have an application there, and you can see some analytics there, and also a person, an employee, a team colleague can also do something on this mobile device to really do some processes, so really operational data use cases, real-time data, and so on. So it's really much more use cases, much more types of products which you would see in a typical, BI or like data warehousing or data lake environment. So that's not something which can be served just by those things. It's more use cases, so more data consumers. And also looking back on the data sources, you will see again a lot of different things. So compared to kind of older type of architectures, we would usually have just operating systems there, like ERPs or CRMs and so on. Here you actually have this behind the scenes, but you also have data warehouses and data marts. You have streaming systems, you have online analytics, SaaS, marketing, you have data lakes, you have all kinds of things. And this is, of course, differentiated. There are different domains who are owning this, owning the data, and also owning the products. And data virtuality, by having this distributed architecture, allows different domains to manage those things in their own way, both the products and also the sources and the data in the sources, while having this central data self-service platform, which is also one of the pillars, having this centralized platform to deliver the data, to manage the governance, the permissions, to have the data lineage, to store metadata in a central way. But again, this is, of course, where if you want to go really expand your data governance capabilities, then you would also want to add something like an enterprise data catalog. So for this customer, it's Calibra, which gathers not only the technical metadata, but also the higher level metadata, business metadata, and so on, to make it an overall governance, kind of comprehensive governance system. And on the other side, what is also interesting here is also the cloud aspect here, because you will see that this company is also migrating part of their data in the cloud. They cannot migrate all of it for different reasons, but they're migrating parts of it. And despite the data living in different places, in Snowflake and cloud, and also different on-premise systems, it's still as one self-service platform which delivers data to different data consumers, but also to humans by means of something which is called the business data shop, where a human can log in and search for data sets and get their data there. So this is talking more about those different domains and this self-service platform aspect, and also data as a product. So I think this is how data virtuality is able to cover all those different pieces together, but again, not alone, but as a part of a bigger technological setup to enable this data mesh architecture.
That sounds really, really interesting, Nick, with all. So for me, it's just like the data virtuality platform helped the ongoing data journey from human to technology, from business to IT, and it's still ongoing, it's still coming, and we can see different kind of aspects coming in there. And the idea is that all of this, which hasn't beforehand worked like this, works in harmony together. And Michele, is there a couple of words? Because I already kind of wanted to know from your side, what do you think enables data mesh? And you know, how does that differ from data fabric? And we touched upon that a little bit earlier. So maybe we can combine those two things and my question to that one as well.
Yeah, I mean, you know, so when you're starting from a data fabric perspective and, you know, using something like data virtualization, I think what Nick is sort of presenting is there's some fundamentals where the technology teams, the data engineering teams are creating components today. They're starting blocks for, you know, composing those components together to get to different types of products and solutions that you want to deliver on. But the ability to build on top of that, what data mesh is then providing when you say data as a product is all of those components are also now available and reusable by the consumers themselves. So again, it helps them speed up what they want to be able to do with the data, speed up the outcomes that they can get with the data. And the data products that they build are also starting points for the next group to come in and get value from the data. So really what we're doing by bringing things like our technical foundations of data fabric and our best practices approaches from data mesh together is really allowing ourselves to kind of talk about that first principle that I said before. Start with something that you can solve for and see an outcome from quickly, and then give yourself the opportunity to reuse that and scale that value further.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. So one of the things I kind of picked up is basically it means that when you're using or reusing the components, it's time to market is much faster. You can share the information much faster. Instead of having these silos where you just have the information and nobody understands that, you suddenly have, as you said, data as a product which can be shared all across. Nick, is there any other kind of points also where you would think where there's a difference between data fabric and data mesh you would want to come to, or do you feel that, you know, that we've covered that?
Yeah, I think it's covered. I think it's covered very well. So I think one thing which we see, or at least I see in my conversations that really different use cases where before it was considered like separate things which need separate technologies. So they kind of grow together more. And for example, the analytical use cases or operational use cases get much more interconnected, and also things which you would put into data mesh and also data fabric, they kind of grow more together.
Okay. And so when we talk about that, and you as the owner of Data Virtuality, how do you consider these aspects in your roadmap? You know, what's your goal? Like, are you thinking of becoming a data mesh vendor? Where are you taking this?
Yeah, so thank you for this question. I think I mentioned this already, and this really part of our philosophy that you cannot be kind of a single data mesh vendor. So you cannot bring a product out there which is called data mesh. So it's really more about the concept and also about philosophy. But of course, we do believe in some core principles, some of which we are already implementing, and they're already there in the product. Things like decentralization of data, things like enabling all users to have to have access to data in different ways with the tools they need and for the use cases they need. And there are also some things which we would like to work more on, also being inspired by this concept of data mesh, is, for example, to enable more collaboration also within one domain, but also between different domains. also working, also adding features, adding components, which would make all those people participating in this data mesh kind of ecosystem to be able to work better with each other, because you will have more technical teams there and you have less technical teams. So it's very important that there's also on the technology side, there are features which foster more collaboration, more knowledge sharing, more mutual understanding, both for the business of where the data come from and how to work with them, and also for the technical people to be able to kind of provide the data on one side in the best possible way for the business users in the quickest way, but on the other side in a way which is secure, which has permissions, governance, which has good data quality, and so on and so on and so on. So to kind of to summarize it, our goal and our mission is to continue and to go on the road to be a trusted solution for effortless access to all kinds of data, to manage, automate, and share this data, and to enable a kind of data delivery layer which is both flexible and scalable in one single platform.
Okay, that sounds fantastic, and it's I'm very excited to see where this is going to lead going forward. Michele, would you like to add anything or any kind of pointers which you think we should kind of go?
There's probably a couple of things. One is, organizations are really thinking about not just how do I build the next forecast, but what are the elements that actually go into that forecast, for example, and recognizing that a forecast isn't just the output and activities of what's happening within marketing and sales. It's what's in your inventory. What does the supply chain look like? What orders have we put in for manufacturing? So there's this stitching together of business silos, dealing with the diversity of your business and the diversity of your markets. And I think what data mesh is really helping to do is bring, not just that perspective of subject matter expertise, but the diversity of points of view and experience that allows you to stitch together those different elements and harmonize the silos of your business. That's really what it's about. And I think, something else that we're kind of headed into technically is, the self-service is naturally fulfilling a SaaS model. And so you need to be able to leverage the cloud to do that. You need to have that offset of handling and having the managed services go along behind that. Again, what Nick talked about is reducing that complexity and buying into products and platforms and capabilities that really embrace not just the SaaS model, but the cloud model as well, because it's reinforcing those architectural principles to help you reduce the complexity, start small, build components, create reusability in order to scale into, broadly into an area that you've already started, or giving you beachheads into the next areas of your business to generate value.
So this brings me straight back to Nick. I didn't hear you mention SaaS. And Michele seems to think that this is really an important point. Please tell us about that.
That's very good point, because for us, it's kind of so self-understanding that I even forgot to mention this. So it's one of those elephants which is so big that you don't even think of it. So indeed one of the big things, for example, also when you ask me what do we do to better enable data mesh, is the SaaS technology, because we believe that the focus should be shifting of the organization should be shifting away from installing, setting up, and operating the technology, which is still in many cases what drives many of the projects. So in our understanding, it should be shifting away from doing this towards more working with the data, sharing the data, modeling the data, building data products, so the business things, while the all those things which SaaS is doing, like operations, maintenance, and so on, should actually be shifted towards the vendor. And this is definitely the major thing which we are pursuing also in our roadmap, providing our solution, our platform as a SaaS self-service data delivery platform.
So basically, we look after, or Data Virtuality looks after the technology, and I've just written this down so you can see me kind of looking and focusing at the bottom, so that the companies can focus on the human aspect and derive the best information out of data. Would that kind of summarize that a little bit?
Exactly, absolutely.
So then we really are kind of ready for our next poll. So, and the question for the poll is the project. So let's have a look. Are you thinking of implementing data mesh initiatives? So some say yes this year, some later, some don't know. Nobody's next year, which is interesting. So pretty much like things kind of going really, really fast. And Michele, I don't know if we've gone into, so I'm going to go back to a little question, which is after the data mesh. I think you've touched upon that a little bit, but I just wondered if there was a couple of words you would want to kind of add further. What do you think comes after data mesh? You know, what's the next big thing? What's the next hype?
God.
Look into your crystal ball.
I know, into my crystal ball. Don't underestimate the power of community. I think that's something that we really need to take into account, that if you do data mesh well, or at least plant some really strong foundations of it, it isn't just something to drive your own internal competency around data and getting insights and using that to drive business outcomes, but you're recognizing that the world of data is as much how do you acquire and share information and insight with your business partners? How do you acquire and share information with your customers? How do you acquire and share information with the market or the industry? That everybody is interconnected today. And so the ability to use data mesh as a catalyst to allow you to paint your entire business world with the data that is available to you, I think is definitely something to keep an eye on, and it translates itself into just a different perspective of how you see your business and your partner ecosystem, really. And so all those times you say, oh, can I share that sales and account list with you when you want to go to market together? Or, automotive companies are, manufacturing some of their parts, but they're acquiring other manufactured parts from other areas of the world. And how do you share the information and simulate, parts coming together? Before you actually build something, like that is your ecosystem, that is your community. Embrace that, because that's really where the bigger outcomes from your organization is coming from. So if you have self-service, if you're executing on the governance appropriately, if you're executing on, the domain centricity, that context, deriving the context and the semantics of the data, you are building data products that allow you to expand beyond the four walls of your insular organization.
Yes, exactly. And by building those data products, you potentially as well would be reducing like the shadow IT, which is, I suppose, created now by the instant need of the businesses. So by sharing this information, by creating a decentralized platform, but where everybody can access the information while sharing it as a product, and creating then therefore also making the company more data driven, I suppose, and creating a different perspective. That sounds all very interesting and very exciting going forward. So let me then grab this and ask one question, and maybe people will start thinking about it. The first question I have there is do you think, and this goes to Michele and Nick, do you think that data mesh is applicable for every company out there? Michele. let's start with you.
Okay.
He's on mute.
Well, I've convinced people that if you're going to be data driven, it's sort of a no-brainer. If you're not really applying those data mesh principles, you're going to continue to struggle. And I've seen a lot of organizations making big bets and big investments on the most modern platforms out there, and even loading data into their warehouses and modern warehouses like a snowflake, thinking that, oh, it's your field of dreams. Everybody's going to use the data. And the reality is that's just not true, because you didn't focus on really understanding what's the experience, what are the use cases, how is data going to support the questions and the decisions and the actions that the business is making. So really, it's more of a scenario where if you don't have data mesh, you're not progressing your data agenda. So please do.
That sounds really good. And Nick, what would you think? Is it applicable for every company?
Well, in my eyes, you would still need to have a certain size, of course. So we can discard the very small companies where probably they're still doing something similar, but they just don't call it this. And maybe I would also continue by saying that probably even the companies who say, okay, we are not doing data mesh. I mean, they are probably still doing something like this, but just the bad pieces without the good pieces, and they don't call it the name because traditionally the way they would look in the reality, you would have like a data warehouse, several data marts, a data lake, and then many people in the company who are building something of their own. Some reports, some shadow IT, some other ways of getting to the data. So basically, it was kind of the need, and the real life was always bigger. Until the data mesh came around, the real life was always bigger than the concepts which were out there. So data mesh is actually the first approach in having a concept which is maybe of a similar size as the real life, and an approach of giving it more clarity, more structure, and institutionalizing it a bit more. So yeah, I mean, the real thing behind the data mesh is kind of there anyway. So this decentralization, this business ownership, is just there. It's either you try to organize it and make use of it, or you just leave it in chaos. So that's not a real either or. It's of course a decision, but it's not like if you don't go the way of data mesh that you don't have this in your organization.
So the way I would understand that is basically that in a very small company, you kind of have data mesh already because you're talking to each other and you're sharing your information. And while that might not be in the technology, you're already doing that because everybody knows everybody's business in that way. And potentially you have one set of data. So in that case, even though they're not implicating and needing all the technology to enable it because they're much more less complex, they're actually already doing it. So it's coming from that side. And as you're getting bigger, making sure that all this communication is happening, you're having to start working towards it. And that's where you need like support from technologies to be able to do so, is maybe a way to think about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Nick, I have another question for you. And then that we're coming, I think, to the end. So you coming from the user side, you've obviously in the past worked for a company called Koch Media, which nobody outside of Germany will know because they did German folk music, but more to that later. And what do you think of this new concept?
Well, I think I kind of even covered this question, because I think we finally have a concept which is more trying to represent the real life and provide some means to kind of understand how things are happening in the reality anyway, and what the needs are out there, which were not covered yet. So I'm really excited about this concept. I mean, as a data virtualization provider, we were trying to work towards helping this decentralized understanding of things and decentralized architecture and so on from the technology side. But we were always also aware that it's not about technologies, it's decentralization. That's really about the mindset, the organization, about the humans. So I'm really excited that this concept, also from the business side, or a concept which is combining business and technology view on things, is appearing and getting more and more traction.
Well, thank you so much, both of you, Michele and Nick, for all the questions you answered. Sorry for asking so many. We're really, really happy that everybody else was able to attend and participate in this. So until the next time, when we'll talk about the next hype, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. Speak to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.